What's up, Wizards? It's Dev. Top 3 new decks of the week, plus an honorable mention, because you know, you know where you are. Right? Don't fool yourself. Now, first thing I got to tell you before we really get into it is that this week was a week of consolidation at the top, mostly. You know, a lot of mono red and its various offshoots, especially Boros. That deck's great right now. But even more, blue black. Lots of Dimir and the various ways to build that too. There was a challenge earlier this week that was like 7 out of the top 8 decks are all Dimir, which is absolutely nuts. You know, so maybe we got to have a big boy grown up conversation about what to do about swamps in standard. And I'm only about 60% kidding on that one. But that said, we did get some new stuff. You know, some of the new stuff were kind of grasping at straws. Like, ooh, that looks spicy. Did it win a tournament? No, but you know, take whatever I can get at this point. So with that said, I do have 4 decks to look at like normal, even though it says top 3 again. I like to do a little bit of extra for you. That's for you. So with that in mind, let's take a look at our first deck of the week here. It's Abzan Overlords. Now, we've seen decks like this in the last, even before Foundations came out, you know, these kind of Atraxa or domain packages that get pared down to their simplest aspects. Often they get pared down to just Selesnya. To be as straightforward as possible. But this player added swamps back to the deck after doing that. And again, swamps are pretty powerful. So let's look at this deck. We're playing play sets each of Overlord of the Hauntwoods and Overlord of the Mistmoors. The green one and the white Overlord. So, you know, the green one ramps, the white one puts a bunch of flying tokens on the board. These are very good magic cards. But the only other creature we're on is Clifftop Lookout, which is going to sound weird, but it's kind of another copy of Overlord of the Hauntwoods. If you don't get Overlord of the Hauntwoods on 3 in this deck, then you can get Clifftop Lookout instead, so you have like an 85 to 90% chance of ramping with a body on turn 3. That feels pretty good. But this is all fairly rote. You don't often see 3 Clifftop Lookout, but you know, cool inclusion. Now, let's get to a much cooler inclusion even, and that's Starfall Invocation, a 4 of in this deck. Usually you'd see Sunfall because it's one of the best white sweepers ever printed at any point in Magic history, but sometimes you'd see Deadly Cover Up. The deck has Swamp, so it can access that card. But now we're playing Starfall. We have Overlord of the Mistmoors out as a creature, you know, when we play this card. Then we can return it to the table immediately and get another couple of 2/1 flyers. You know, we swept the board that turn. And now we have 10 total power on 3 guys. 4 of it flies. That's a pretty swingy play when it comes to the pendulum of advantage. It should swing back in our favor pretty easily if we pull that off. But even if all we get back is a Clifftop Lookout from our Starfall Invocation, we might feel good about that. You know, a little ramp here and there goes a long way. So I like the inclusion of Starfall Invocation. I think it's definitely a gutsy include, but a good one, if nothing. But Duress is also a main deck 2 of here. There's a good reason to add swamps right now. Duress is just kind of busted. If you're playing black, and statistically you probably are, if you're not playing red, you're probably playing swamps in your deck. Cut a couple of cards and add a couple of Duress if you're not already doing it, and you'd be surprised what might happen in your favor if you do that. But there's also 1 Silver Bullet Pillage the Bog in the main deck here. Late in the game, especially comboing with Overlord of the Hauntwoods, which makes lands for you. Then Pillage the Bog is just basically Demonic Tutor. And you've plotted it some of the time, so it's free the turn you cast it. You spend all your mana getting the thing you tutored up, you know, so Pillage makes a lot of sense as a 1 of, and the Selesnya version of this deck really wants like a tutor like this, so why not add swamps? In this format, that's the time-honored question, the age-old, why not just add swamps? You know, you get to play Go for the Throat in your deck if you add swamps. This could be Get Lost, and that could be better. I'm not actually sure at this point. You don't always want to give your opponent map tokens, but Go for the Throat's still a pretty clean removal spell. A Silver Bullet Outrageous Robbery to give us some dimension in the late game. You know, we ripped off the top of our library in a kind of stalemate or a game that's gone long. And Robbery will usually help us win the game. It's just a great little mid-range piece, but you don't want too many pieces or, you know, copies of it. Apart from that, Scroll Shift is in the deck, just as a 2-up. This isn't the 4-up Scroll Shift deck, but this can be used to, you know, make Overlord of the Mistmoors a creature on turn 5. Which is very good. so good. Or Overlord of the Hauntwoods creature on turn 4, and that's crazy. It's so nuts. You can also use this to save your Overlords when they get targeted by removal spells, and that's a blowout, you know? Like, oh, you want to get lost, my guy? Well, I'm just going to Scroll Shift, get the ETB trigger over again, and now it's a creature, and I draw cards, game's over. So Scroll Shift is the busted piece, but I understand the 2 of here. I don't think you need the 3 or 4 of. It'll gum things up. Seize from Slumber is in this deck. Good week for this card. It's not the only deck I've seen it in. Plus, there's another card just like this from a different set, either Foundations or Murders at Karlov Manor. It's basically the same card, and it's seen some play this week too, mostly because of Up the Beanstalk. That's got to be why. Like, Seeds from Slumber costs 5 mana, but it costs 3 less to cast if you're targeting a tapped guy, and it destroys a creature. So typically I like stuff like Not on My Watch, in favor of this. But again, when you got Beans in your deck, even if you're casting this for 2 mana, it's still a 5 mana card. So kill that guy, draw a card is kind of too ridiculous to pass up, man. You take that a lot of the time. So try out Seeds for Slumber, or From Slumber, in your Beans deck if you haven't done it yet. Virtue of Persistence also draws a card off of Beans. We cast the enchantment half, but in the early game, just a really good 2-drop, great removal spell. Gain some life, make sure that we don't get hit for extra damage from like Heartfire Hero or Scamp, just an all-around great card. So really like this deck. Looking at the lands, there's 25 of them. That's it. A couple of Cavern of Souls, you name Avatar, there's the land. You got Fountain Port, sure. But in the sideboard, the 2 cards that jump out at me are first Render Inert, which can, just so you know, can make one of our overlords a creature. We can take all the impending counters off of it, and it's instantly a creature, which is gross. But we can also, destroy planeswalkers and stuff with this, which is not terrible. But apart from that, Archangel of Wrath is the other card that stands out to me, man. This is kind of good with Overlord of the Hauntwoods, because Hauntwoods can make the red mana needed effectively to kick this card to the full extent. And I kind of like that wrinkle too. So overall, kind of a green-black sideboard here with the cut downs, the duress, the Ghost Vacuum, 1 copy of Nissa, some Tranquil Throwbacks, Tear Asunder, 1 Aclazotz, a 2nd copy of Robbery. So again, very Golgari-ish sideboard here, but I like some of the inclusions, the technology that's been employed in the board too. So overall, cool deck here. Went 5-0 in a standard league, which isn't the absolute best finish in the world. One of the reasons it's the honorable mention. And also, it's kind of HME because, stuff like this has been done before, but not exactly this. And I wanted to give it some spotlight. But that's it for this deck. Second deck of the week. Let's look at another one that's kind of been done a couple of times, but we just haven't seen it in a long time. And this one is slightly different than we normally see. This is an Agatha Soul Cauldron Gruul deck. Now, this is the one that wants to Voldaren Thrillseeker, and basically just stick this activated ability on potentially every single creature in the deck, allowing us to fling any creature at any time for damage equal to its power and finish the game that way. But the deck does have a pretty decent aggro game plan too, especially this build, which is what I think is special about this brew of the deck, right? We don't often see builds of Agatha Soul Cauldron that have 12 1-drops that aren't doing some stupid combo in mono blue or something. This has 4 Paw Patch Recruits, 4 Heartfire Hero, 4 Hired Claw, 12 balls to the wall on 1-drops. We will get a 1-drop in every single game. And I really like how aggressive the deck is. It's trying to get in actual, I won't even say that. I was going to say it's trying to get in chip damage. It's not. It can finish a game with an aggro game plan. Before it has to enact its dumb Voldaren Thrillseeker Agatha Soul Cauldron tricks. I really like that about this deck. It's actually a serious grown-up aggro deck that can win before it has to do anything too silly, right? Apart from that, though, there's Goldbane Hydra in this deck, which can get us a ton of ramp and take advantage of any mana sink, that we need. It is a mana sink, is I guess what I'm saying here. And it just has a bunch of keyword abilities. Yes, we'll take a Goldbane Hydra, and we'll, stick any of these activated abilities on it. But especially late in the game, when you have Agatha Soul Cauldron with a Voldaren Thrillseeker up under it or something, then Goldbane Hydra just represents Fireball, effectively. Off the top of your library, it's Fireball. So, yes, you'll do that. But the deck also has a couple of new cards that we haven't seen before, like Chainsaw. Haven't really seen this card in the deck either. This enters, it's 2 mana for an equipment. Enters, deals 3 damage to a creature. And then whenever 1 or more creatures die, this gets a counter. And the creature it's equipped to gets +X/+0, X being the number of counters on it. So kind of a neat little mode. Sometimes a creature get +2/+0, +3/+0. If the game goes long, sometimes even more than that. But it's effectively a removal spell. Right? And it can increase the power of our creatures so they fling a little bit better if they have Thrillseeker's activated ability. All pretty cool. But Ozolith the Shattered Spire is in here too, along with Innkeeper's Talent. This is good for just increasing the amount, power toughness of our creatures. Again, with or without Soul Cauldron and Thrillseeker, it's good to have both of these guys. They work well with the Valiant on, Heartfire Hero, because we can say target hero with either one of these abilities, and it'll get basically double counters because that's how Heartfire Hero's Valiant works, And Innkeeper's Talent, just a good card. Both of these are just good. They work well with each other. They kind of combo well with each other too. So cool little red-green, like, +1/+1 counters deck that can aggro you out in the early game. And, by the way, this Thrill Seeker ability is not the only activated ability you want to put on other stuff. There's also the Hard Claw activated ability, which is not terrible. It's really not that bad in, like, you know, when you're fighting in the trenches. So, I don't know, man. Just a really, really interesting take on this deck that's super low to the ground, and rather than just like, okay, we're all in on Thrill Seeker and Cauldron, and that's our entire game plan. No. Our game plan is to be an aggro deck with the Thrill Seeker as a backup plan. I think that's actually the much better way to sort of go about things. So keep your eyes peeled for this one. This was actually another cool thing about this deck is that there were multiple last chance tournaments on MTGO this week. And most last chance tournaments were populated by, again, blue-black, mono-red, Boros, you know, decks that are kind of a sure thing. We know that they are good decks in this meta and they can get you some work in, right? This player in a last chance tournament decided to play this deck of all decks. You know, you got one more shot to make it in this, you know, in this season points-wise. What deck do you choose? You don't reach for something tried and true like Boros or Dimir. They reached for this and they got 4-1. They went 4-1 with this deck in a last chance tournament populated by all the best decks in Standard and some of the best MTGO grinders there are in the world today. So that should tell you a little bit of something about this deck. And again, I think it deserves a spotlight this week. But apart from that, next one is one that has generated a lot of buzz this week. I had people on stream asking me to talk about it. MTG Rocks did an article about it, and I know a couple of other places did articles about this deck, but I don't want to say which ones they are. I think MTG Arenazone might be one, but I don't want to say that they did it when they didn't. But I know I've seen at least 3 articles about Maze's End combo this week alone. Even though the deck does not have, as far as I've seen, at least, I may be wrong, but I have not seen any 5-0 league finishes, last chance finishes, standard challenge finishes, local tournament finishes, overseas tournament finishes on MTG Melee. I have not really seen any true action from this deck outside of Magic Arena, like Wizards of the Coast's own deck list page, where they will sometimes upload decks that won 6 games in a row. That's the only place I've really seen this deck. So normally I wouldn't include it in a video like this, but it is kind of the talk of the town this week. And if you hadn't heard about it, I wanted to talk about it. This is Maze's End. It's Maze's End combo. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's 26 lands in this thing, and I'm a little surprised at the inclusion of just one of some of these guild gates. Because, you know, we got 2... Yeah, we got 2 Simic guild gates and 3 Selesnya guild gates. There's actually more Sunken Citadel and Lush Portico in the deck than there are some guild gates. Thran Portal is a gate. In case you didn't know that, Thran Portal counts as a gate. So we got 3 of these in the deck. This is actually the gate we're playing the most of, but a lot of them are just 1-ups, which is wild to me. In case you don't know the combo, what this deck is attempting to do, and apparently does so with some regularity, is Head Shredder. It's the first piece of the combo. So a 4-mana 5/5 vehicle that crews for 1. When it attacks, you can mill 2 cards. But here's the important line of text. Whenever 1 or more lands are put into your yard from your library, put them onto the battlefield tapped. All right, so you mill some cards, which it does on your attack step. When you attack, it mills some cards. It can ramp you that way. That's pretty cool. But what we want to do is Jace the Perfected Mind, which is in Phyrexian here. I don't know why Moxfield does that. I should probably change the version to something else. I bet I could probably do that. Switch printing to this one. What a genius I am. Select it. Boom. So now we can all read the card together, unless the text is too small on your screen. It probably is. But the mode that matters on this is target player mills 3 times X cards. So we play this for 4 mana, and we can mill ourselves, 15 cards immediately, something like that. So the idea is that we have Head Shredder out. We mill ourselves for 15 with Jace. We put all the gates into play. We activate Maze's End, and we win the game. Is that ever going to happen? Apparently it does. Clifftop Lookout, also in this deck. There's a lot of lands, a lot of them very important. The Clifftop Lookout is even better in this deck because it can find any land. So it's going to find a gate 8 times or more out of 10. Mono Relves is in here so that we can get a circuitous route on turn 3, a Clifftop Lookout on turn 2, or another card on Spelunking on turn 2. Yeah, that's all good. We'll take Mono Relves. Circuitous Route in here because it nabs 2 gates, really important. 2 Day of Judgment and 2 Sunfall for total sweepers in the deck. 4 Cash Grab because it fills our graveyard. We'll take that. 2 Get Lost, good removal. Join Exploration, it's ramp. We can throw things on the table. Hedge Shredder's a full 4 of because it's part of the combo. And Spelunking's a full 4 of because if we do the combo and get all those lands, then first of all, we want the Maze's End to come into play and be able to like immediately do its thing so it can interplay tapped. So Spelunking will keep it from doing that. And we also want to be able to, you know, to use all of our gates for mana the turn they come into play, right? So if we like Hedge Shredder and get like 7 lands and one of them's a Maze's End, the rest of them are enough guild gates to like finish the game with a Maze's End, then boom, just immediately tap the gates that we just got to activate Maze's End, which we wouldn't be able to do without Spelunking, right? So also a very important card for the deck. Draws us further into the deck to get the combo pieces. Just that's it though. That's the deck. There is a sideboard with Authority of the Consuls to slow down mono red. You need a lot of ways to slow down mono red, and I don't think the board is doing it enough. But it's also Expedition Map. This just searches for a land card. I get the feeling that the player wanted this in the main deck. We just couldn't find room for it. So we'll throw it in the sideboard. Ghost Vacuum's in here because we don't want to get blown out by, you know, Reanimator. And we can even make it a 3 of because we'll get to 6 lands, baby. We'll be able to activate this all day. 3 negate? Yes, 3 negate. I believe that this is probably the most well-used sideboard slot, except for maybe Authority. 2 Patchwork Formation to blow up enchantments, creatures with flying. There's a lot of those. Archfiend of the Dross, blah, blah, blah. And then Terra Sunder to blow up any permanent type, which is great. It's a good thing to have access to, but I honestly think this deck needs a little something more against like the mono red decks in Standard. You know, the 2 things that you're kind of up against here are blue tempo with counter spells, right? Dimir decks, the best deck in the format to my mind right now. And then the second most likely thing to run into is probably some sort of mono red or mono red variant. And yeah, you've got some sweepers in the deck, but you don't respect mono red with, you know, the inclusion of Cut Down or Torch the Tower or anything like that. You've got a couple of like Get Losts, you know, like that's you're gonna die to mono red. But when you go to like put your combo in play, you know, you gotta resolve a 4-mana Hedge Shredder and a 4-mana Jace the Mind. Is Dimir ever gonna let you have those cards on the table? I don't think so. So I worry a bit about this deck, but again, it went 6-0, so maybe there's some sort of inevitability involved with Maze's End that I'm kind of not seeing here because the card is obviously inevitable, but you're playing a bunch of 1-of gates, you know, you just have to hope you draw all your 1-ofs and then win off of Maze's End. I'm not seeing it. But again, this deck has gotten a lot of press this week, and I wanted to bring it up in case you hadn't seen it yet. If you're excited about it, please play it and report back to me because I'm not too sure. But we got one more to look at this week, and it's another kind of returning banger in terms of the name of the deck, what the deck is. You know, it's not like we haven't seen this before, but this deck actually includes a almost completely new game plan in terms of how to build this deck. It is Orzhov mid-range right here. Yeah, not necessarily the newest thing under the sun, right? But when you actually look at the cards that are included in this list, you'll see that this isn't just, you know, your average Orzhov mid-range list. We get to play a few brand new cards in this. I mean, half the cards on the screen are cards we did not have access to 3 weeks ago, right? So you got your Archfiend of the Dross. Let's just let you know, Archfiend is in this deck. And does that mean there's Unholy Annex? Absolutely. So this is the demon package deck. But I like the innovation that we've seen. I like the fact that the demon package just allows you to build almost any deck you want to, so long as they have like these 7 cards, 3 Archfiends and 4 Unholy Annex, and then do whatever else you want to, Hoss. You know, and that's what this player did, going hog wild and actually getting the best finish of any deck that we're looking at this week. This went 7th place, so top 8 in an MTGO challenge this week. Playing again a bunch of brand new cards. Those are all the cards that see play, other than like Cut Down is a 3 of, Anoint with Afflictions a 2 of, Go for the Throat's a 4 of. So, you know, not plus Legions to Ashes. So again, the requisite 10 removal spells that you'll often see in a mid-range deck. This deck is packing those too, but the rest of the creature base is wild. You know, like you've got Charming Prince as a 4 of in here, and a great 2-drop too. This can either enter and just like kind of be a roadblock, you know. I'll chump block with it. I might, you know, take your guy out, trade, whatever, take your guy out with it, and gain 3 life. You know, I'll gain 3 life. Sure, it's actually a pretty good mode. But if we have, say, a Phyrexian Flesh Gorger out, if we say have that card, then we can use Charming Prince to blink the Phyrexian Flesh Gorger and just make it a 7/5 Menace lifelink, which is disgusting. Absolutely repulsive to have that ability in this deck. But we can also say if Archfiend of the Draws is getting a little bit too low, right, then we can always Charming Prince it and give it its counters back so that we don't like lose the game to it. So that's also a neat like ancillary mode on Prince here. Just overall a good card, man. It really is. Apart from that, Null Priest of Oblivion is in here as a kind of reanimator spell. That's also just a good, 2-mana guy. Like, we resolve this on turn 2 and we have a Child of Night, with Menace in this case. We have a 2-mana, 2/1 lifelinker. And that's good for getting in some damage against some decks, keeping up your life total, but just blocking and trading against like mono red and other decks that want to attack you and gaining life at the same time is a great ability. Same thing with Sunblessed Healer. The only thing in this deck this can really get back is Charming Prince and Null Priest. That's like it. That's all it does. But you know what else it does? 3-power lifelinker on turn 2. It's either going to force a removal spell out of your opponent's hand if it's like a shock or burst lightning or lightning strike. That's a spell that ain't hitting you in the dome. They got to dedicate mana to it too, mostly on their turn a lot of the time. So it's just an interesting card right now. Like, even if you're not actually reanimating anything with it, it's just a 3-power lifelink. It's great. So we have, 8 lifelink creatures on turn 2 here and another 4 of 2-drop that gains us 3 life. So that's you're really respecting mono red as a deck at that point. But all this life gain is appreciated because we're also playing Alinda, Saint of Dusk in the deck too. So if our life total is greater than our starting life total, this is a 5/5 Menace lifelink hexproof from instance. But even if our life total is below our starting life total, then, it's still a 4/4. It's still 4/4 lifelink, more or less hexproof from most things that matter. They can still lay down arms it, and it's dead to sweepers and stuff. But get lost, go for the throat. All the played removal in the format is not going to touch this, and that is actually disgusting. Very, very good. Our curve here is neat, right? We can go like turn 2 Charming Prince, turn 3 Flesh Gorger, turn 4 Archfiend or Alinda. That's neat. That's a pretty good curve, man. Like, even if all you're doing on 2 is playing Sunblessed Healer, getting in for damage and covering with removal until you can play a larger creature, like, you're gaining a little bit of life. You're putting some damage on them. You're holding their creatures off to where you can get to the point in the game where, like, you are drawing your extra cards off of Annex. You are getting, the full benefit of Alinda. She's starting to smash in and swing the game for you. So just, again, really well-built sort of black-white mid-range deck here. As far as the lands go, they're 24, all 4 Restless Fortress in here, and 2 Soulstone Sanctuary. We're starting to see this a little bit more, the old Soulstone Creamery. This is a demon, right? It's not a Mutavault, but it still has all creature types. So it is a demon that you can play in your mana base for Unholy Annex. And even if, you make it a creature and it never goes back to a land and it's, now it's going to die to sweepers, whatever, you don't care. It's playing, 8 and 9 copies of demons in your deck for Unholy Annex. So you'll take that all day. When we get to the sideboard here, we get to see Caustic Bronco. So again, we just kind of become a more sort of aggressive mid-range deck that wants to draw some more cards, and I like that. Cut down, just a 1-up, but we're still respecting mono red. 4 duress, yes. 1, that's my kind of inclusion. 1 exercise in here to take out the artifacts and enchantments and blah, blah, blahs. Gix, Yawgmoth Prider. Again, with Caustic Bronco and Gix as a 2-3 curve in game 2 and 3, we are drawing more cards and being a little bit more aggressive than we are in game 1. That might be good. Gix's Command is in here to just blow people completely out. Great sideboard card. And then a second copy of Legions to Ashes is kind of a catch-all. Make sure we deal with anything, I like Legions to Ashes. That's a good Magic card too. But overall, this isn't the most innovative deck of the week, but it does play like the most new cards. Weirdly, new cards and newly reprinted cards and stuff like that. So I really wanted to highlight it, not only because of that, but because, best performing deck of the week too. I think that counts for something. But that's all I've got for this one, guys. Join me again next week. 3 more new decks, and it's almost time to talk about what this meta actually is and the best decks in it and all that, and do a video more along those lines than looking for the spice. We got to actually point out what the good stuff is. So subscribe to the channel for that content, plus a boatload more. I got a lot of stuff planned here, and I do all kinds of nonsense. So sub to the sandwich if you haven't done it yet. Like the video, share it around, put it in more recommended feeds. That would help out a lot. And if you really want to help the absolute most, you can check out the Patreon. $1 a month, link in the description. And it will keep this kind of content coming if that's a thing you want. But anyway, y'all, that's all I've got for this one. I'll catch you cats later. Spread love and be kind.